have that go back over 48 million years ago. So this relationship between the cordyceps and the ants and the plants have been going on for a long, long time. And let's talk a little bit more about this. Let's go to the next slide. So basically what happens here is you get these infected ants that drop the spores onto the ants below. And what happens is that the ants start doing something that's completely kind of against their nature, which is clambering up on all kinds of leaves and stuff like that. And that's one of the reasons they call this summit disease. So basically what's happened is that some of the compounds that the mushroom spores are starting to produce on the mushroom is starting to take over the action of the ants, and the ants are doing something that they don't like to do. Typically these ants are nocturnal, and what the mushroom ends up doing is kind of changing that behavior, and it kind of forces the ant to go along and climb up these trees, and sometimes they fall down and they climb up again, and when they found a really good leaf that's perfect, they end up latching onto it, into that little beam, that little stem running down the middle of the leaf. The interesting thing that what happens is that all of this happens about 25 centimeters off the ground. So just under a foot off the ground, which is the perfect place for the fungi to start producing spores, to basically drop onto the mushrooms, or actually the ants that are below. One of the interesting things about this is that the process basically happens where they latch onto the leaf at noon, like plus or minus within an hour of high noon. And so the fungi have their own clock, and basically what they do is they override the ant's clock, because the ant should be sleeping. And there's a lot of really good reasons for this, because the ants are nocturnal. They end up keeping out of the way of all of the kind of the guard ants that go and take out all the sick ants out of the system, so they're disposed of before they can infect anybody. So basically the fungi kind of do this off of change the ants' life cycle, and they put them up these trees. It's a very fascinating process on how they do it. And so at that point, the mushroom is a parasite. And after that ant basically locks on and bites onto that leaf, it's kind of like a seizure or a big spasm that the ant has in its jaws, and it locks onto this thing, and all of a sudden it can't release there. And when that happens, all of a sudden the fungi changes from being a parasite to being a saprophyte, and basically it starts to eat the fungal, or the fungi start to eat the ant's body, and start growing hyphae throughout everything to create these fruiting bodies to disperse the spores. So they kind of do this at noon because they want to go through the cycle where they're sporulating first thing in the morning, and actually still while it's dark, while the other ants are moving around. Very interestingly, the spores of the fungi don't have a lot of melanin in them, so they're not very resistant to sunlight. So basically they'll dry out really quickly, and they'll get broken down by UV and stuff like that. So all of this has to happen at night. So the timing is absolutely critical on what these fungi do. So interestingly, that you would think that, as this fungi takes over the mushroom, that most of the stuff or most of the fungal activity would be in the brain, but actually it's not. Most of the the action of the fungi is outside of the brain, and whether it's chemical, they're not really quite sure exactly what's happening, but it basically controls the body without controls the ant's body without controlling the ant's brain at all. And that's kind of the life cycle of these zombie ants. Very, very fascinating what fungi have the ability to do and have been doing for a long time. Let's go to the next slide.